You are Israel, my firstborn.
Hey, good day everyone. It's Chris Wilson with Torah and Messiah YouTube channel. Bringing you another chapter of Let This Mind Be in You by Brad Scott, because go figure, I left my other book at home. So for whatever reason, I got to swap the books out that I carry in my truck and the one I have on my desk at home. So that way we can continue our look into the principle of the seed, which we will be on chapter 8, who is Israel. And I've got half of it recorded. That was a pretty lengthy chapter, and I just got to finish recording the other half. I'm going to put it up as one teaching. But on this one, we're in chapter 3, the Athenian history. And this is, again, Let This Mind Be in You, an historical study of the differences between Greek and Hebrew thought. So without further ado, Chapter 3, the Athenian history. Socrates. We have now come to what is known as the Athenian age. In the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War around the 4th century BC. This episode in Greek history produced the famous philosopher Socrates. According to most current encyclopedias, Socrates was the most influential thinker in the Western world. Socrates, although he wrote nothing of his own, was the progenitor of the philosophy that man's evil actions are caused by ignorance. He developed what is called today the Socratic method. This is referred to as inductive reasoning. Reasoning from particular facts to a general idea. In theory, this seems logical, but all the reasoning depended upon what was considered a fact. Life was based upon thoughts and ideas to be debated. Many of the testimonies of Socrates' students attested to the fact that there were rarely any conclusions drawn, but everyone looked forward to the next debate. Socrates lived in poverty and disdained material possessions. He believed that no one knowingly did evil. Although Socrates was a thorn in the flesh of conventional Greek thinking, he nonetheless separated himself from any instructions of the gods and taught that, after careful scrutiny, one should rely on his own moral intellect to lead a happy life. Socrates, like many before him, sought wisdom no matter where it came from. Every culture had a part to play in the collective mind, as long as moral knowledge was the goal. Socrates' student, Plato, will be the one who introduces the world to the demiurge. Plato, the beginning of the end. As we begin to enter the Hellenistic era of the evolution of Western thought, we come to the basic fork in the road. Socrates' most famous student is going to take Greek philosophy to its most respected heights. Socrates was not adept at winning friends and influencing his enemies. Actually, up to this time, Greek thinking was rather tame and was quite compatible with scriptural thinking. But Plato is about to take it to a new level. This is where we will spend some time revealing what we really mean when we speak of Greek thought. Plato lived from 428 to 348 BC. Most history books and encyclopedias credit Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle for being the most influential people in Western history. Their philosophical views sprang forth from Homer's great mythical heroes. This led to the ultimate philosophical goal of excellence, which led to the various social structures of Greek life. Plato, of course, was a member of the social elite. This was part of the background of his most powerful contribution to religious thought, the dualism of man. Plato taught that man consisted of two parts, the soul and the flesh. He taught that only the soul was good, and good is what all men seek. The flesh was evil and could do no good. The body was only one passing phase of our cosmic existence. Only the soul was involved in the future, and only the soul could do any good. So what the body did was virtually irrelevant. The people who were able to grasp this concept were in the highest class, called the guardians. These belonged to the educated class, and were trained to live in shared houses, or cities, and to eat in the same mess halls, restaurants. Their children were to be raised as a group in a common environment by special caretakers. This is public schools. Only this ruling class possessed the knowledge to determine policies and to make decisions, which determined who was to be allowed to mate with whom to produce the best children. Does this sound familiar? The goal of all this was intellectual excellence. Plato brought to the world a nation of thinkers. Knowledge was the key to everything. This, we will see, led to the era of Gnosticism, which is alive and well today, albeit under other names. Multitudes of mystery cults would come forth from this philosophy. Life was intellectualized and only for the initiated. Life consisted of abstract metaphysical concepts. This is why I am personally very skeptical of turning the simple commands of God into abstract concepts. Why? Because one cannot prove or disprove these abstract concepts. This is why the students of Plato would argue for days in the great theaters without reaching any conclusions. They would stand by themselves in empty theaters and argue against fictitious opponents with imaginary audiences. These great debates were designed to cause people's minds to conceive the demiurge or ultimate mind around them and to ignore the concrete realities of the world in which they lived. The demiurge was the dualistic god that created the world. He was the cruel god of battles and bloody sacrifices. The world was cruel and could not have been created by a good god, since all matter is evil. So this cruel demiurge sent a sun god called the Logos, who is the good god. The Old Testament, or Tanakh, was a cruel book of laws, judgment, and death. The New Testament was the result of the incarnation of the God of the gods, the mind of the gods, called the Logos. We will get into much more detail about this later. This demiurge, literally worker of the people, was whimsical and could change his mind or desires at any time. He would impose certain demands on his creation at any time and then withdraw them at any time. Laws and commands were spontaneous. The whole idea of the one God was no different than the images of all the gods. They were always subject to limitations and foresight. And, of course, this God was only interested in the invisible, spiritual world, since the physical world was evil. When the body performed an evil act, it was simply seen as the natural thing for an evil, material body to do. This thinking would eventually lead to some of the same kinds of behavior we see today. Quoting Plato from his Symposium, quote, "I believe that the greatest good for a youth is to have a worthy lover from early on, and for a lover to have a worthy beloved. The values that men need who want to live lives of excellence lifelong are better instilled by love than by their relatives or offices or wealth or anything else." End quote. In the Greek social life of his time, homosexuality was common. Greeks, by this period, found it natural for an older man to be sexually aroused by the physical beauty of a boy. The physical was not to possess eternity, only the soul. Sex was a physical activity, as were diet, festivals, celebrations, rest days, treatment of disease, and worship. So, Plato also began the era of the sophists. These philosophers continued in Plato's teaching that matters of the physical are matters of human relativism. Matters of family, government, education, customs, or law were all relative because they were all outside the soulish area. Truth was determined by persuasiveness. Whoever had the best argument was the purveyor of truth. Truth was determined by man's own will. Since the gods were to be worshipped and revered and had no instructions for man, man was left to determine his own instructions for himself. Therefore, some things were good and some things were bad, and some things were good and bad at the same time. When potential governors would debate, the same subjects would be argued year after year, for there was no absolute. Sound familiar? Plato introduced the world to many philosophies that shaped the world in which we live today. He would soon produce another student who would be the most influential man in the life of Alexander the Great. We will discuss this man next. All right, folks, well, that's Chapter 3, the Athenian History. We're looking into the Let This Mind Be in You by Brad Scott, an historical study of the differences between Greek and Hebrew thought. Just an incredible display of how we come about in our modern day of society through our own government of democracy or of a republic, which is a mixture of Grecian and Roman political governing. We gather our republic from that of Rome, and we gather our democracy from that of Greece, of ancient Roman Greece, that is. And, you know, it's interesting when he says that in Greek social life of the time, homosexuality was common. You know, we don't really think of that, or maybe you're unfamiliar of that and you don't think of it. Because I sure wasn't until I dug deep into the ancient realm of Grecian history and saw this. Yeah, but anyway, it just makes me go on to think of all the child molestation that goes on within the Catholic Church and probably some other factions of religious bodies today. But we kind of see a common theme going on there with the Athenian history and what we read about or hear about in the news of today in the religious world, or even of our own politics. You know, we see some interesting parallels there. But it is quite interesting to say the least. And chapter 4 is going to be Aristotle and Alexander the Great, whenever we look into that. And so until next time, my friends, may Yahweh bless you and keep you. And if I don't hear from you, or I guess I should say if I don't read to you or provide a study for you, and if you're not joining in, have a wonderful Shavuot and a fantastic Sabbath, and may Yahweh bless you and keep you, and may He give you His shalom and just shower down His blessings upon you and keep you safe from harm, sin, and evil. May He guard your eyes, ears, your heart, and your mind. And above all, remember, test everything and be a doer of the word, my friends. Shalom.
O Israel, put your hope in Yahweh, who makes war.